I raised my husband's son like my own, but then the DNA test said he wasn't even his either. The first time I saw Caleb, he was screaming in his father's arms in the waiting room. His tiny fists were balled up, his cheeks flushed from crying, and his father, a man I'd never met, looked like he hadn't slept in days. I was 27, working the night shift at the pediatric ward of our small-town hospital. I had just finished dealing with a cranky toddler who'd swallowed a penny when I walked past the doors and saw them. The man, tall, disheveled, pale, had bloodshot eyes and a look of sheer panic. He was trying to comfort the baby in his arms, but it was clear he was unraveling. I walked over without even thinking. "Do you need help?" I asked gently. He turned, startled, and his voice cracked as he said, I think he has a fever. He won't stop crying. I don't know what to do. I didn't know then that this moment would change the rest of my life. His name was Nathan, and the baby, Caleb, was his 2-month-old son. His wife had died during childbirth, he told me. Complications. It happened so fast. One day he was rubbing her feet and laughing about baby names, and the next he was holding a newborn and signing a death certificate. His whole world had flipped. I felt sorry for him. Not just the kind of pity you feel for a stranger, but something deeper. Something instinctive. I could feel his pain like it was my own. That night, after Caleb was seen and his fever came down, I stayed with Nathan a little longer. Just talked, listened. He looked so lost. He said he hadn't slept in 3 days. That he was afraid he was going to ruin his son. That he hadn't even had time to grieve. I told him he was already doing better than most. We met again a week later, by accident, or maybe fate. He was in the pediatric clinic for Caleb's follow-up. I offered him coffee. He looked at me like I just handed him gold. That became a pattern. Coffee, then conversation. Then walks around the hospital garden with Caleb in the stroller. Nathan wasn't flashy. He wasn't the smooth talker my ex had been. He didn't wear expensive cologne or boast about money. But there was something in his eyes, something warm, earnest, maybe a little wounded. I found myself drawn to him, and the way he looked at Caleb, like the boy was both his anchor and his reason for breathing, melted every frozen piece of me. By the time Caleb turned 1, I was practically living at their place. I'd moved out of my tiny apartment and into Nathan's modest house on the edge of town. Caleb started calling me Mama before I even realized how much I loved him. Not like a babysitter. Not like a stepmom, but like he was mine. Nathan proposed on a quiet Tuesday evening. There were no rose petals or big speeches. Just him, holding my hand in the kitchen, while Caleb played with a wooden spoon on the floor. "You're already his mother," he said. "I just hope one day you'll agree to be mine." I cried as I said yes. Our wedding was small but beautiful. I wore a simple lace dress and walked down a path in the park, with Caleb tossing flower petals ahead of me. That day felt like a new beginning, not just for me, but for all 3 of us. I wasn't just joining a man, I was becoming part of a family. For the first few years, things were good. Not fairy tale perfect, but real. Nathan worked in real estate, and I continued nursing. Caleb was the heart of our home, bright, curious, mischievous. I never once felt like he wasn't mine. I sat beside him at doctor's appointments, kissed his scraped knees, stayed up all night through his ear infections. I was there for every birthday party, every school orientation, every sleepless nightmare. But as the years passed, small things started to shift. Nathan started working longer hours. He said the housing market was getting more competitive, that he had to hustle if we wanted to afford Caleb's future. I didn't question it at first. I knew he was trying. But then came the missed dinners. The weekend client meetings that ran suspiciously late. The unfamiliar cologne that lingered on his shirts. I remember one evening clearly. I was folding laundry when I saw a red lipstick stain on Nathan's white dress shirt. I don't wear red lipstick. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off. Client's wife hugged me goodbye. Italian types. They kiss cheeks, it's a whole thing. I let it go. Not because I believed him, but because I didn't want to not believe him. Because once you pull one thread, the whole sweater unravels. And I wasn't ready to face what might be underneath. Then one night, I was up late charting notes for work on the home laptop when a notification popped up on his phone. It was a text from a contact saved as just the letter C. He's beautiful. Looks just like you. My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, rereading it over and over. He's beautiful. Not she. Not you. He. And looks just like you? Was this about Caleb? I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept spiraling. If Caleb looked just like Nathan, why would someone else be texting that? And if this C was referring to another child? God, no, I couldn't go there. But that message planted something I couldn't unsee. And soon, other things started surfacing. Nathan had stopped mentioning his late wife. He used to keep a photo of her, a small, framed one, in his office. I hadn't seen it in years. When I asked what happened to it, he shrugged. Too many memories, he said. I don't want to confuse Caleb. It sounded reasonable. But then, one day while cleaning out the hallway closet, I found a sealed envelope tucked inside an old book. It was Caleb's birth certificate. I almost didn't look at it. I'd never needed to. I was mom. Nathan was dad. That was enough. But something, call it instinct, made me open it. My hands shook as I read the name listed under mother. It wasn't Nathan's late wife. It wasn't even close. It was a name I had never heard before. Candace Marie Ellis. Age 22. No address listed. Just a ghost on paper. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I walked to the bathroom and threw up. For years, I had believed I was raising my husband's son after a tragic accident took his wife. I thought I was filling a role that fate had cruelly taken from someone else. But now I didn't know what to believe. Who was Candace? Where was she? Why had Nathan lied? And more importantly, why did he pretend that Caleb was the child of a dead wife who, according to this document, never gave birth to him at all? I didn't confront Nathan that night. I couldn't. My world had tilted sideways and I needed answers, real answers, not carefully constructed lies. So I began to dig. I took Caleb's toothbrush, wrapped it in a clean Ziploc bag, and sent it off for a DNA test without telling Nathan. I also started researching Candace Ellis. Nothing came up on social media. No obituaries. No missing persons reports. It was like she'd been erased. But the most damning moment, the one that cemented everything, came a week later when I received the email from the DNA lab. I stared at the results, unable to comprehend what I was reading. Caleb was not biologically related to Nathan. Not even a partial match. I reread the test 4 times, praying I'd misunderstood something. But no. The boy I had raised, loved, protected like my own flesh and blood, wasn't even my husband's son. Everything Nathan had told me was a lie. I stared at the screen until the blue light burned into my retinas. The DNA report was clear, clinical, and completely soul-shattering. Probability of paternity: 0.00%. There was no room for interpretation. No chance that a lab assistant had made a mistake. No margin of error. Nathan was not Caleb's biological father. Which meant everything he told me about his wife dying during childbirth, about being a grieving single dad, about the fragile little family I thought I was helping rebuild, it was all a story. A fabrication. A lie. I sat at the kitchen table, the test results open in front of me, my entire body numb. I looked over at Caleb, now 6 years old, sitting on the floor playing with Legos. My sweet boy. My entire heart. He was humming softly, completely unaware that in one moment, everything had shifted. That his whole identity, the truth of where he came from, who he was, had been obliterated with a single PDF file. I didn't know what to do. Confront Nathan? Call the police? Take Caleb and run? Instead, I did what nurses are trained to do in chaos. I compartmentalized. I spent the next few days pretending. I smiled at dinner. I kissed Nathan goodnight. I read Caleb his bedtime stories. And then, once the house was quiet, I dug. I started with the hospital records. I had access to our system through work, and though it was against protocol, I knew how to search without leaving a trace. I found something. A delivery record from 6 years ago under the name Candace Ellis. Baby boy. No father listed. Delivery complications noted. Minor hemorrhaging. But both mother and baby stable upon discharge. She had left the hospital 2 days later. Alive. Nathan had told me Caleb's mother died giving birth. But she hadn't. She was alive when she left the hospital. So where was she now? I tried finding Candace online again, this time more determined. I searched property records, credit databases, social media using advanced filters. Nothing. Then I remembered the text message Nathan received weeks ago, the one from C. The one that said, "He's beautiful. Looks just like you." Was that her? Had Candace somehow reached out? That night, while Nathan was asleep, I unlocked his phone using Face ID, a trick I'd seen him do when Caleb was asleep in his arms. My hands shook, but I moved fast. I opened the messaging app and searched for C. It wasn't a number. It was a contact. Candace. There were dozens of messages. Some recent, some stretching back years. Candace. Do you ever think about how different things would have been if we had kept him together? Nathan. Don't start this again. Candace. He doesn't even know me. You said I could see him. You promised. Nathan. That wasn't the deal. You said you didn't want him. Candace. I was scared, Nathan. I didn't know what I was doing. You made me believe you'd take care of him. But now you're married, and she thinks he's yours? That's sick. My throat tightened. She thinks he's yours. My chest felt like it was caving in. He hadn't just lied to me. He had stolen that child. And then made me raise him. It was all a performance. From the night he showed up in that hospital with Caleb to every tear he cried at our wedding, every single gesture was designed to build a lie so elaborate I'd never think to question it. He must have met Candace when she was young, vulnerable. Maybe they had a brief relationship, maybe something darker. She'd gotten pregnant. He convinced her to sign over parental rights, or maybe threatened her. And then he invented the story of a dead wife to cover his tracks. And I, desperate for love, aching to be a mother, walked straight into the fantasy he had crafted. But why? Why go through all that trouble? Why me? Was it for love? Manipulation? Or something even more sinister? And then, one text revealed everything. Candace, you only married her because of her salary. You said she'd pay for everything while you figured out how to flip houses full time. I froze. I read it again. And again. You only married her because of her salary. Oh my God. This wasn't just betrayal. It was exploitation. Nathan had targeted me. Used Caleb as bait. Faked grief. Faked pain. Faked love. Also, I would step in and financially support his fantasy of fatherhood while he lived out his career dreams on my dime. The night terrors. The cologne. The lies about late night showings. None of it was just an affair. This was a long con. And I had been the mark. I closed the messages, placed the phone back on the nightstand, and crawled into bed beside him. I lay there for hours, listening to his breathing, thinking about the last 6 years of my life, the birthdays, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, all built on a rotten foundation. And worst of all, I still loved Caleb. He was innocent in all of this. He didn't ask to be a pawn in some manipulative scheme. He was my son, in every way that mattered. But now, I didn't even know whose child he was. Candace was his mother. But who was his biological father? Because it sure as hell wasn't Nathan. The next day, I took Caleb to school and then drove to a private lab across town. I submitted a request for a full parental and sibling DNA profile, this time including myself. And I waited. Days passed. I played my role. I smiled, cooked, did laundry. Pretended I wasn't coming undone inside. Nathan was oblivious, or maybe he was just arrogant enough to think I'd never figure it out. When the second DNA report came in, it confirmed what I had suspected. Caleb was not related to either of us. Not to me. Not to Nathan. Not even distantly. Which meant he wasn't Nathan's son at all. Nathan had taken someone else's child, possibly without legal adoption, and passed him off as his own. I remembered Candace's words. He doesn't even know me. What had Nathan done to her? Had she been manipulated into giving up her baby? Was she still looking for him? The pieces came together in a horrifying snap. Nathan had likely seduced a young woman, taken her child, erased her from the narrative, and then used that child, my Caleb, as a means to secure financial stability through me. It was never about love. It was about survival, manipulation, control. I was never his wife in the traditional sense. I was his asset. And now I had a choice. Expose him and risk losing Caleb in a legal mess? Stay quiet and live a lie forever? Or something else, something colder, sharper, strategic. Revenge. But not the screaming, plate-throwing kind. No. The kind that takes patience, precision. The kind that looks like love on the outside. Until the knife turns. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after the second DNA report. The quiet in our house became unbearable. Every creak in the floor, every breath from Nathan lying beside me, made my skin crawl. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every hug, every kiss. All of it hollow. All of it part of some long-running act I'd been tricked into believing was real. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was how deep I was in it. How thoroughly I had built my life around a lie. And yet, through all the rage, the heartbreak, the confusion, I kept thinking about Caleb. My sweet boy. The one who used to fall asleep on my chest as a baby, whose tiny fingers once clutched my pinky like a lifeline. The one who called me mama without hesitation. The one who, just that morning, had kissed my cheek before heading off to school and whispered, "I love you more than cookies." He didn't know. He couldn't know. He had no idea the 2 people he called his parents weren't even biologically connected to him. No idea that he was the product of a transaction, a manipulation, a theft. And what scared me the most was the possibility that if I didn't act soon, he'd grow up becoming just like Nathan. Selfish, calculated, hollow inside. I couldn't let that happen. But I couldn't tear his world apart either, not without a plan. Not without making sure he ended up safe, not passed around the system like a file nobody wanted to open. So I started keeping records. I backed up the text messages from Candace to a secure cloud folder, screenshots, timestamps, everything. I saved both DNA reports, along with copies of Caleb's birth certificate and hospital files. I wrote out a timeline, detailing every inconsistency Nathan had ever told me, cross-referenced with what I had discovered. I documented it like I was preparing for a court case. Because, in a way, I was. But I didn't go to a lawyer yet. Because I didn't want to just expose Nathan. I wanted to destroy him. Quietly. Slowly. Like he had done to me. The first step was pretending. I smiled more. Touched his arm when I passed him in the kitchen. Initiated date nights. I watched his face, always searching for any sign that he suspected something was off. But he didn't. He was too comfortable in the role he'd built for himself, doting father, loving husband, hardworking man chasing real estate dreams. He believed the mask he wore had become his real face. And that made him easy to manipulate. I encouraged him to take more risks at work. "You've always wanted to flip houses," I said one night over wine. "Why not go all in? I've got savings. Let's use it." His eyes sparkled like a man who thought he'd won the lottery. He reached across the table, took my hands in his, and said, "God, I love you." I smiled back. He had no idea I'd been quietly transferring funds into a hidden account for weeks. No idea I was setting him up to fall. That weekend, I arranged for Caleb to spend the day with a friend from school. I used the time to drive to a nearby city, where I met a private investigator, someone who specialized in gray area family cases. I handed him a file folder full of documents and said, "I need to find Candace Ellis. And I need to know everything about Nathan McMillan." He raised an eyebrow. "How far do you want to go?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "As far as it takes." The next few weeks were a blur of pretending, school pickups, PTA meetings, shared dinners. But beneath the surface, everything was boiling. The pie worked fast. Within 10 days, I had a full dossier. Candace Ellis had once been a server at a roadside diner 2 towns over. She and Nathan had met when she was 21. He was 34. No real job. In and out of debt. According to neighbors, she'd gotten pregnant and stopped working around month 5. Then, she vanished. No forwarding address. No job history. No social media. But what the pie found next sent shivers down my spine. She'd filed a missing child report 6 years ago. It was closed after 2 weeks due to lack of evidence and voluntary parental surrender. It was Nathan who had told authorities she signed over rights and produced a forged signature. The investigator compared it with an old job application of hers. It wasn't a match. She hadn't given her baby away. She'd had him taken. And nobody believed her. Because Nathan had constructed such a perfect lie, grieving father, tragic loss, single parent trying his best, and society loves a man who seems broken but trying. And me? I was the perfect finishing touch. A professional woman, emotionally invested, providing structure, money, credibility. I wasn't just a pawn in this. I was the final piece of his con. And I was done. That night, after I tucked Caleb into bed, I stood in the doorway for a long time watching him sleep. I wanted to freeze that moment, the calm before the storm I was about to unleash. He was innocent. And I was going to protect him at all costs. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is how slow you have to freeze it, moment by moment, breath by breath, until you feel nothing at all. No anger. No guilt. Just precision. That's where I was now. Everything Nathan had done, the lies, the manipulation, the stolen child, it had been a long con. But I was going to make sure my ending was even longer. And when it came, it would be sharp enough to leave scars. Step 1. Legally prepare the ground. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, one who specialized in family law and fraudulent adoption cases. I handed over every document I had. The birth certificate, both DNA reports, the forged maternal surrender, the text messages from Candace, the missing child report, and the private investigator's file. The lawyer's face went pale by page 3. You understand, she said carefully, that what your husband did may qualify not just as fraud, but kidnapping. I nodded. And I want to make sure I don't lose my son when it all goes public. Because that's what terrified me most. That when the house of lies came crashing down, Caleb would be ripped from me too, placed in foster care or handed over to someone who didn't know him like I did. The lawyer gave me a long look and said, then we need to do this quietly. Controlled. You expose him, but protect the child. We'll file emergency motions when the time comes. I was ready. Step 2. Build the illusion. Nathan thought he was winning. Ever since I'd encouraged him to go big on his real estate flips, he'd been more confident than ever. I helped him build a website. I made phone calls pretending to be his assistant. I supported every deal, all while slowly moving joint funds out of our shared account and into one under my name only. He didn't even notice. Why would he? In his mind, I was just the supportive wife, the same one he'd emotionally conditioned for years. When he asked to take out a $60,000 loan under both our names for a renovation project, I agreed without blinking. Except, I changed the paperwork. I forged the documents so his name alone appeared on the debt. I had the forms notarized. Everything looked clean. Legal. Then I helped him buy a rundown fixer-upper, a big project in a transitional neighborhood, the kind that required every penny he had. He called it his legacy project. I called it his grave. Step 3. Track every lie. I kept digging. Candace wasn't just someone Nathan had used. She was someone he had broken. And even though I was building my revenge for me, I couldn't ignore what he had done to her. With my lawyer's help, I got in touch with Candace. Carefully, quietly. We met in a public park. She looked older than 28. Like life had wrung her out too early. But when she saw the photo of Caleb I brought, her hand flew to her mouth. She began to sob. I knew he was still out there, she whispered. I knew he lied to me. She told me everything. She had never wanted to give Caleb up. But Nathan had isolated her. convinced her she was unfit, that she'd lose the baby to the system. Then one night, when she was drugged after a C-section, he told the hospital she was unstable and had agreed to let him raise the child. She woke up the next day in a room alone. No baby. No answers. She filed reports. Tried to sue. But she didn't have the money or family to back her. Eventually, she was silenced. Until now. I promised her. This time, he won't win. And I meant it. Step 4. Drop the match. When the day finally came, it felt almost anticlimactic. There were no fireworks. No screaming. Just the quiet clicking of dominoes falling. It started with the bank. Nathan got a call saying his account had been drained. That the loan he thought was under our joint names was actually his alone. And it was now defaulting because I quietly used the funds to pay off my own debts and exit the business deal. Then came the IRS audit, prompted by an anonymous tip and supported by screenshots I'd sent showing his unreported cash earnings, flipped homes, and fake write-offs. Then the real estate board. More complaints. More proof of unethical behavior. Licensing suspended. Then, the letter from my lawyer. It detailed everything, with documents attached. The falsified adoption. The paternity fraud. The text with Candace. The DNA reports. A polite but firm warning that he was now under review for custody interference, financial deception, and possibly kidnapping charges depending on what came next. I served it to him in our living room, just after dinner. He opened the envelope and laughed at first. Then he looked up at me. "You're bluffing." I just stared back. Then I slid my phone across the table, opened to the folder of messages between him and Candace. His face drained of color. Then came the panic. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You'll lose him too." "No," I said softly. "I won't. Candace will take him back. Candace doesn't want to take him away. She wants him safe. She wants justice. And we're going to give her both." He lunged toward me, not physically violent, but desperate, cornered. The mask finally slipping. But it was too late. "I gave you everything," he spat. "I made you a mother. You made me a fool," I said. "And now I'm going to make sure the whole world sees what you really are." That night, I packed Caleb's things and left. We stayed with my sister for a week, then moved into a small apartment near the school he loved. I didn't tell him everything, only what was age appropriate. That some things about our family weren't what we believed, but that he was safe and loved and mine. "I don't care where I came from," he whispered one night, curled up in my arms. "You're my mom." And that was all I needed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. Nathan was unraveling. His real estate license was under suspension. His accounts were frozen. The loan he thought we'd taken together was now entirely on his shoulders, and the house he'd bet everything on was rotting in limbo. No buyers. No permits. Just termites and unpaid taxes. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because even with the lies exposed, the legal motions filed, and Caleb safely tucked into a new life, there was still a piece of the puzzle missing. The father. The real one. If Nathan wasn't Caleb's biological father, then who was? It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was necessity. For medical history. For identity. For truth. Caleb deserved to know where he came from, especially after being used and lied to for so long. Candace didn't know much. She hadn't spoken to the man more than twice. She thought his name was Jason. They met at a party. He was a friend of Nathan's, a construction guy, maybe. It was hazy, alcohol, blurred memory, youthful recklessness. But she was sure of one thing. Nathan introduced them. Which meant Nathan might know exactly who the father was and had kept that secret all along. I reached out one last time. Not in person. Not emotionally. Just a message. "I need the truth. Who is Caleb's real father?" No reply for 2 days. Then, finally, "He's no one. You don't need to look. Just let it go." Let it go? Let him go? No. That wasn't going to happen. So I went back to the private investigator. I gave him Candace's old party photos, names of Nathan's former construction buddies, and even some old voicemails where Nathan had mentioned a man named Jay. It took a week. Then I got the call. We found him. His name was Jason McMillan. My stomach dropped. McMillan. Same last name. I asked the investigator to repeat it. Yes, he confirmed. Nathan's younger brother. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the world spinning around me. Caleb's real father was Nathan's own brother. And suddenly, everything made a terrifying kind of sense. That's why Nathan had targeted Candace. That's why he manipulated her. That's why he had taken Caleb and buried the truth, not just to build a lie, but to erase a shame he couldn't live with. He couldn't let the world know his brother had fathered a child with a girl Nathan had introduced. Maybe he was jealous. Maybe he was in love with Candace himself. Maybe he thought Caleb would be better off with him than with Jason, who had apparently vanished across the country and cut ties with the family years ago. Or maybe Nathan had taken Caleb to punish his brother, to take what was his, to raise him like a trophy, a breathing monument to power, to ownership. And I had walked right into the center of it. But the twist didn't end there. Because I wanted to know more. I wanted to see this man, Jason. To look him in the eyes. To tell him what had happened. So I tracked him down, a carpenter living in Oregon, completely off the grid, working odd jobs, no social media. We spoke on the phone. He was cautious, but when I said the name Caleb, he went silent. I always wondered what happened to him, Jason said quietly. I thought Candace had an abortion. Nathan told me she did. I never heard from her again. So Nathan hadn't just taken the child. He had erased the father too. I sent Jason the DNA results. He agreed to take a test of his own. Within days, it was confirmed. Jason McMillan, biological father. 99.97% match. I thought I'd be angry. But what I felt was grief. Grief for everything Caleb had lost. A mother who'd been silenced. A father who'd been lied to. A childhood built on secrets. I didn't tell Caleb right away. He was only 6. There was time, and I wanted to do it right. Gradually. Carefully. I asked Jason if he'd be willing to meet him someday, slowly, no pressure. He agreed. Only if he wants to, he said. I don't want to confuse him. You're his mom. I'm just someone with a past. But I saw something in his eyes. Regret and hope. 2 weeks later, Nathan was served with final notice. He had no legal parental rights. No financial claim to Caleb. No pathway to appeal. The judge had ruled in favor of Candace and me jointly, acknowledging that the fraudulent adoption had never been valid, and that my long-term custodial role, combined with Candace's biological rights, gave us the full say. He was out. No visitation. No contact. He lost everything. He sent one last letter. Not to me. To Caleb. I read it first. It was pathetic. No apology. Just excuses. A few lines about how life is complicated and people make mistakes. And then a sentence that made me want to scream. Maybe someday you'll understand why I did what I did. I didn't show it to Caleb. Instead, I burned it. Because he didn't need closure from a man who built his love out of lies. He needed truth. And love that was real. 2 years later, Caleb is thriving. He's 8 now. Smart, thoughtful, still obsessed with Legos and dinosaurs. He knows now that Nathan wasn't his real father. He knows he was lied to. But more importantly, he knows he's safe. He knows he's loved. He sees Candace every other weekend. Slowly, they're rebuilding something. Not just biology, but connection. And Jason? He sends letters, drawings, birthday cards. They've had 2 supervised visits. Caleb doesn't call him dad, not yet. Maybe never. But there's a door open now. A window of truth, where once there was only a locked room full of shadows. As for me, I still carry the scars. The ache of betrayal never fully disappears. But I also carry peace. Because in the end, I didn't just take revenge on Nathan. I ended the lie. I reclaimed my son. And I gave him back his future, one built not on deceit, but on something far more powerful: truth. And love that doesn't need blood to be real.